studying game development at Lincoln University, and then got a job at EA. So I was working on Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. But I was sort of very lucky to get that job coming out of university. But a friend of mine had applied, and he had the same degree that I did. So I knew technically I was qualified, even though I felt like I sort of needed to work on my portfolio before applying to places. So I applied. I thought my interview went pretty terribly, but it turned out I got the job. So we were job title was a level integrator. We were basically scripting content in C++, so a programming language, but the programmers at the company had kind of written a scripting language using that for us. So we were kind of telling the characters where to go, what to do at the right times, and programming what happens when the player does this thing, how does the mission move on. So that was a contract. I was there for about 8 months, and then I was lucky enough to go to Lionhead Studios, where I worked on a game called Fable 2. I thought you guys might be a bit too young to know that, but there's a few nods of recognition. There I was doing kind of a similar thing, but we were using Lua, which is like a fully fledged scripting language to set up the game's missions and to put content in. Then after that, I went to a company called Kuju Knickknack, where I worked on a variety of children's games, and then went to Sony very briefly after that, working on another Harry Potter game, the Book of Potions, and then I became a lead designer at Marmalade, so that was working on lots of different Hasbro titles for mobile devices. Unfortunately, though, they're not available anymore. Sort of Hasbro had them up as like a promotional thing for a while, but then took it off the asset store, so can't play them, which is a bit of a shame considering how much work went into those. But it's one of those sort of things in game development, really. So now I'm working on Lost Words, which is a 2D platformer set in the pages of a diary. You have to move words around the screen to solve different puzzles. Sketchbook Games, my studios that have been running about 3 years now, and I've got a short trailer to kind of show you what the game is like. We're just trying to get that finished off at the moment. We're looking to release early next year, so it's taken quite a long while. It started off as a project in a game jam, so the space of a weekend sort of threw some ideas together, and I was trying to make one thing, and it went a bit wrong, and I ended up making something completely different, but then I preferred that idea to my original one, so I sort of ran with that and kept developing it, and then eventually got offered some funding for it. So now we have a small team of us sort of trying to finish that off and release that. Michelle sent me a couple of questions to answer, and I also have a chat about sort of getting a job in the games industry, so that's the main focus of the rest of the presentation. But to start us off with some of these questions. What's it like working in a game studio? I think it varies a lot depending on the studio, and they all have their different cultures. But generally, I think it's a pretty fun place to work, get to be creative and make cool stuff that hopefully is going to be played by lots and lots of people, maybe millions of people if you're lucky enough to work on a title that's that successful. Whether it's a big one or a small one, sometimes they can do really well. And I think it's the people are pretty nice. You're doing cool stuff. I think. good fun. I feel pretty lucky to get to do what I do. Most exciting and challenging moments, I guess being offered some funding for my own project was kind of quite a high point, and then getting to hire a team of people, but it's also quite difficult and stressful, and there's lots of things that can go wrong, and because we got our funding in sort of increments, we had some money but not enough to make the whole game. So then when I hired some people, we were then having to sort of get the game good enough so that we could get some funding from other people, and so yeah, that can be sort of lots of ups and downs and that sort of thing. But I guess another high point is that actually, even though the game isn't finished yet, we've still taken it to a bunch of shows and put it in front of people. And when you see someone play it and really enjoy it, and tell you they were moved by it and really took something away from it, I think that's sort of really rewarding and makes it all feel very worthwhile. What qualities do I think you need to succeed in games design? I guess there's lots of different skills, but sort of being creative, being a good team worker, because unless you're a solo developer working on your own thing, you have to work with a group of other people, and especially as a game designer, you have to kind of have a clear vision for what you think the game should be, or your section or systems of the game, and then communicate that to other people, and then work with them, because it's not just a case of saying do this thing. It's you need to try stuff out, and then often it won't work the way you thought, so then you need to figure out, okay, maybe we can do this thing, and collaborate with people. Just because you're a game designer doesn't mean you're the only person on the team who has good ideas. So how did my higher education experience help me, and what was it like? So I guess it taught me lots about game development, because when I was going to university there didn't seem to be so much information around online about the different disciplines that it sort of takes to make a game, and so I knew from a young age that I wanted to make games, but I didn't necessarily know which bit. And even when I graduated uni, I felt like I kind of wanted to do 3D modelling, because I'd originally wanted to do programming, but then found I wasn't so good at it. I kind of struggled a bit with it, and my course had some programming modules, but lots of it was other areas as well, like 3D modelling, maths, animation, game design, so it was quite a mix. Perhaps if I'd sort of done straight computer science, I might have grasped programming better, and it is something I've come back to and played around with, because I do really enjoy the technical side of things. And so prototyping Lost Words, programming that myself was good fun. But yeah, I think it gives you a really good structured learning environment, and you get a whole bunch of projects under your belt. You meet a whole bunch of other people who are interested in making games as well. If you're doing a course to do with that, or whatever course you do, you're going to meet people with common interests, and there's lots of different societies that you can join as well. So yeah, I think it sets you up really well for whatever career you want, but especially game development. And now there's lots of different specialisms as well. You can do games programming, or you could do sort of animation, 3D modelling, whatever aspect it is that you want to go into. But I would just advise to kind of look into the different courses, because they're not all of the same quality, and so you want to get into a good university that really teaches you well and teaches you the skills that you need. And also looking into if they're sort of accredited by any games industry bodies, and if they actually work with the games industry itself and any sort of actual companies, because then you can find out if they're teaching relevant stuff, because game development as an industry, it moves so fast. Sometimes the courses can be sort of teaching old technology and programming languages that no one really uses anymore. So it's good to make sure they're working with people and everything is up to date. What tips would I offer to anyone interested in a career like mine? I'd say just start making games. Like now, spoilers for the beginning of the presentation, but saying we're at a golden era, and we've got sort of all these tools now. Like when I was at university, Unity, I'm not sure if it had actually been created, but if it had, it was very early stage, and you couldn't do anywhere near as much as you can now. Game Maker was really rudimentary. Scratch wasn't around. Steam hadn't been released yet. The App Store wasn't there. iPhones hadn't been invented, and so it was a lot harder to get your games actually out to people. Now we've got all these stores, so you could make a game tonight and release it, and yeah, so that's pretty cool that we now have that opportunity, and that we have game engines like Unity, Unreal, Scratch, Game Maker that you can use for free. So yeah, I would say just start making things and putting them in front of people, seeing what they like and don't like about them, and learning from that, and then taking that and making your next game, and keep going from there. So yeah, this was the golden era bit. So yeah, also Construct 2, another really good engine. And yeah, different methods of getting your game out there. So I really like this quote. I think this is pretty good advice from a former US president. So nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful people with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated failures. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. So I think it's just saying, if you want something like this, you have to keep working at it really, really hard. And that's the way that you're going to succeed. You make these games and you learn from them, and then you make new stuff. And also, if you see other people doing really cool stuff, use that to motivate you. Don't kind of let that get you down and feel bad about yourself, and just kind of focus on what you can do and like bettering your own abilities. So yeah, in the games industry these days now, there's a bit more information around online. It's good if you can figure out if there's a particular area you want to go into, and with making games now, there's so many different areas that you can go into. Like be a composer, be a sound effects designer, programmer, and even programmer. You can be AI programmer or physics programmer, gameplay, lots of different areas. And so, especially if you go to a big company, there's the capacity to specialize quite a lot. But if you work at a smaller company, then you're much more likely to sort of generalize and get experience in lots of different areas and having to do lots of things. If it's a really small company, maybe even if you're a programmer, you might end up doing lots of things that aren't programming at all, but can be really good experience for you. Animation, 3D modeling, and now we're even seeing lots of other fields that are sort of getting used for game development, like sort of data analysts, psychologists, even architects, kind of other fields where their expertise, and they're sometimes being hired at some of the big games companies, because the types of games we're making are changing and getting more complicated and more realistic. These days, you also have to consider if when you've finished education and graduated and you're looking for work, you now have the decision of if you would like to do your own thing or work for a bigger company. And I felt like when I was at university, there wasn't so much of a choice, and it was just you had to go and work somewhere and get experience. But I do know some people who were in I only met them years later from a different university, but they started a company and they did well. So even back then, it was possible. But yeah, it is very tricky, and I would say maybe if you go and get a degree and work at a big game studio, it can teach you a lot. You can make some useful contacts, learn about all the different software, and then that will put you in a good situation to do your own stuff. And even if you're making your own games now and you just keep doing that, then it's sort of looks really good on your portfolio. But also, you're keeping learning, and then I think that's the best way. Sooner or later, you're hopefully going to have a really cool game on your hands, and then doors start opening for you, and then you've got options. But if you do that while earning money somewhere else, can help you sort of get off the ground. So there's not real any right or wrong over what the best approach is these days. So like I mentioned before, you can either, sometimes at big companies you do specialize a lot versus smaller companies when you can generalize. I guess sometimes people think that being at a bigger company is a bit safer than doing your own thing or being at a smaller company, but that's not always the case. And Lionhead, who made Fable, have been shut down now, and it does does happen that big companies sometimes close their doors, and it's another reason why learning these skills and keeping your portfolio up to date is really handy. So you're always prepared, because you never know what could happen next. And especially if you're when you graduate, you might be at a good time to try doing your own thing, because your expenses will probably be lower than they're ever going to be. So yeah, definitely. It's really cool that you guys are making your own games here, and I would say just keep doing that sort of work on hobby stuff, and even if you like a particular area, maybe you could end up working with a team of people, so you can do the thing that you really want to do if you're just sort of interested in 3D modeling or one specific discipline. So when it comes to applying for jobs, you can't really see here, but I always try and have a spreadsheet, and whether it's sort of jobs in the games industry or even part-time jobs to help you fund yourself through earlier life. I think this sort of thing is really handy. I find it quite motivating to kind of list all the companies that I'm applying to, and kind of as much information as you can put in here, like when you last applied to them, how it was, if it was through their website, or you phoned them up, or you sent them an email, and any details about it, like when you last heard about them, so you can know like when's a good time to follow up if you haven't heard in quite a few weeks. So when you're applying for places, don't get too disheartened if you don't hear back. Like companies are big and get lots of people applying to them, so sometimes you just have to not let it get to you too much. When I was working at Marmalade, actually when I was at university, I was applying to places for like an internship. And I sort of applied to 5 places and didn't hear back, and felt quite hard done by. And then when I was at Marmalade, we had an intern there, and he was telling me he applied to 100 places and he heard back from 5. And then so he had his pick from those 5. So it kind of made me realise it's sort of a numbers game, really. And you just got to keep applying to all these places. I don't know if any of you guys have actually made CVs yet, but I would say it's a really good thing to do as soon as possible, because as soon as you're writing down all this stuff, you kind of realise where you might have some gaps on your CV and the sort of thing that maybe you could do to help fill it. And even if it's some volunteering or going to events or studying a certain thing or doing a specific short course, like all things that can sort of add something to your CV and stand out and make you look good. Like I've mentioned a few times, like doing your own projects does look really cool on a CV, because if you're at a company hiring people and you've got a bunch of people who've only ever made the games that they were told to make as part of their course, or even haven't made any games, then it doesn't look as good as the people who've been making games for fun in their spare time, just because they're passionate about it and they want to do it. And you're as an employer, you're going to realise that they'll have learnt a whole load of skills while doing that, and also just seeing that they can make polished, cool stuff, and they have the ability to actually finish things and not just half do it, or have the idea and not actually do any work towards it. Sections for your CV. You want to. I think it's good to, if you're applying for a specific role, then you want to have that role at the top of your CV, so it's really clear, what you see yourself as, and also if they're hiring lots of things and stuff gets mixed up, it's just a lot easier for them. You want to have a introduction about yourself, just a few sentences to kind of set the scene, and then details about your education, any key skills, and things that you've demonstrated, even that sometimes might not seem that relevant if you've done any part-time work. If you think carefully about that, there's probably skills that are relevant to working in the games industry or whichever job you want to apply for. It's just a case of sort of thinking about those. Maybe you had a paper round, and so therefore you had to be very punctual with that, or you had to organise stuff to do with that and work with other people. So all of those things are sort of areas that look good, putting them down on your CV. Yeah, any events that you've been to, so things like this will sound really cool on your CV, so it's definitely good to put it on there. And because you often send out a CV digitally these days, you can put a link as well, so you can sort of link to the website or any online information for this event. Yeah, any past employment you've had, however big or small. And then also just try and show that you're passionate about games if you're applying to a games company. And you know, sometimes you can have a section there talking about your favourite games, or in your introduction you might mention about some of the games that you like to play. And then also any hobbies and interests you have to show that you're sort of a well-rounded individual and that you're not just interested in one thing. And you want to keep it short. When you're first starting out, probably just fit everything on a page, and then when you're more experienced, you can go to 2 pages, but you don't really ever want to go beyond that, I think. And so, but yeah, you kind of want to make the jump in one go, and it's better to not have like half a page or a page and a half. You always want it to be either 1 full page or 2 full pages. And when you're applying to places, make sure you spell check and actually proofread it yourself. Get someone else to proofread it as well. And then I always see my CV as like an ongoing thing, and every now and then I'll just go in and add some bits to it and update it, because that way if you ever need it, it's pretty much ready, and you're only going to need to make a small tweak. Whereas otherwise, if you suddenly need it and then you have to go back in and do loads of work, you know, it can be difficult, and especially if time is of the essence, then you want to just be able to sort of send it off as soon as possible. And then show it to people as well, people in the games industry, friends and family, and get their thoughts on it and how you can actually make it better. And yeah, just by constantly improving it, you know, you're going to get something really cool. Check out other people's CVs as well. You know, you could ask some friends to see theirs and see what you think they do well, and maybe there's some areas that you could update to match that. And then when you're actually applying somewhere, like I said, often it's an email these days, but sometimes people kind of write a covering letter as a document, and then their CV as a document, and then have an email saying like, hi, you know, please find my application attached. But I think your covering letter should actually be the body of your email, and that should kind of explain why you want to work for this company. Yeah, and then your CV is the one and only attachment with it. I thought I might have a section about covering letters, but in case I don't have that here, I'll just go through it. So basically in the covering letter, you want to start off saying like why you want to work for the company, and you know, if you've played their games and you really like them, then that's a really great thing to mention there. But then you also want to say why they should hire you. And when you start out, you know, it can sometimes feel quite difficult to come up with that stuff, but there's always something. And you know, the fact that you might be a big fan is the first thing, but then you know, maybe you've been studying a particular area and you think your skills are very relevant to them, or you know, you would really love to be a part of their team. And yeah, again, you just sort of think carefully about the skills that you have and how it can apply to them, and why it makes sense for them to hire you. Before you have an interview somewhere, it's always good to research and play their games. When I was at Lionhead, I was interviewing some people, and they come in and you say, have you played any Lionhead games? And they'd be like, no. And you know, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to get the job, but if there's people who have played the games and are passionate and are also equally qualified, then they're going to have the edge over you. So if you can, you know, check out the games of the company you're applying for. It's a good idea. And you have to remember that you're interviewing them too. Not all companies are equal. Some places are better to work for than others. And so if you can, you know, if you get a few interviews, you want to kind of see, is this place right for you? Would it be a good fit? Do you think you'd be happy working there? And make sure you ask questions, because it shows that you're engaged and interested. And also, yeah, I would say get as much interview experience as you can, lots of different companies, because that way, you know, if you get the one big one that you really, really care about, then you'll have a few other interviews under your belt already, and it might help you sort of knowing what to expect, and maybe to feel a bit less nervous. So this website is called Game Dev Map, and it shows all the different game development companies all around the world. So when it comes